Hi. Feel like I've been owing you something. Right. An explanation on why I've taken more than 500 days to actually come back and give you an update. And at least one of you will be happy to know that the project is not really dead or that still things are happening. Maybe you'll not be too over enthusiastic to know that there's no running motorcycle, but I think you might have figured out by now that if I'm sitting here talking to you, it's not really that's not really the case. So, where should we start? Oh, right. We left off at the point where I was working on Eve in my garage. The garage is shared, as you might have noticed. There were cars there as well. There were a couple of hiccups there in the sense that I was trying to keep organized and working on a motorcycle without being in anybody's way, and that mostly worked. I was only getting some weird stares, but generally people were going in and out. Nobody actually asked me to move the motorcycle directly. There was at one point neighbors saying, maybe you shouldn't be doing this here. It's not really a workshop. It's not really legal. And I went over my contract. It really says there that you cannot really be working in your cars more than the regular maintenance of, I don't know, filling your windshield wiper or whatever. I understand. And it reached the funny point where I'm actually proud of this. Somebody put up a A4 sheet of paper with a motorcycle picture, my motorcycle Eve, laminated on the elevator and all around the buildings, basically saying remove it. And so I did. Essentially, somebody got fed up. Somebody told the condo management, and at some point they said, yeah, remove it. I was already far enough ahead that I could take off the final few parts and get the motorcycle into my storage unit. And then I'm already hearing you asking, okay, why haven't you done this in a storage unit to begin with? It's not that big. It's really not that big. If you go now to my storage unit, you're going to find Eve in a bunch of boxes and the frame hanging against the shelves. That's mostly it. The tire somewhere up there. That's how it looks. But in the meantime, there was other progress. For instance, I've sold, and I'm also quite proud of this, enough components of Eve that actually I've already made my initial investment on a donor bike back. I've sold the engine, I've sold the side cases for the motorcycle, I sold the cable tree, fuel sensor, and other small parts, in the sense that now it's paid for itself. Everything I have now is free, air quotes, and if you guys are interested in parts that you might need, be you in Europe or in the US or wherever else, hit me up. I might have something for you. I had also mentioned in the past video that I wanted to open up the gearbox, and it's something I actually did as well. I have it recorded, and I'm going to share it with you in the near future. I hope. I realized that last time I said this, it took me 500 something days to get back to you, but I'm committed to sharing a bit more with you guys, not just doing the work and be happy with it. I want to share this experience with other people so that maybe somebody also feels inspired to do something like this and not just be happy with the status quo. Complex projects are complex and a bit frightening. I'm feeling that a bit at the moment, but they're also quite rewarding when you actually break through and do some progress. And I'll show you a bit what I mean. But in general, right, the gearbox. So I opened the gearbox. Everything seemed correct, seemed good, seemed clean. No wear on the gears, no flakes on the oil super clean. So I was very happy with the state of it. I also took the advantage that I had the motorcycle in parts to actually clean a lot of the gunk that you saw in the first video off of it. And let's be honest, it was a pain to take the gunk out of many things. There's still some things that I haven't gotten to yet, but I had the luck at the time to have access to a facility that had some sandblasting, and I know that there was going to be somebody saying that sandblasting is not the best for some aluminum parts, but out of the easiness of getting all of this shit out of the parts and out of the lack of having, let's say, a big tin of ultrasound cleaner, I went for the shortcut, and now the parts, if you give me a second, actually look like this. So a bit more bare aluminum. This is one of the halves of the front fork. This is quite clean now, and I'm getting to a point where I just need to scrub off some of the crevices that still have some gunk on them before I actually paint it. I want to paint this black. This is some of the progress tied to removing things from Eve. And then, as I mentioned now, I got distracted with actually buying stuff for it. I said, okay, there's a lot of low-hanging fruit, so let's go through them. And I bought the headlight, I bought the tires, I bought springs for these front suspension. Essentially, the front suspension, as I mentioned in the first video, was too soft, and from feedback from forums and friends, because I am not clearly experienced enough to have my proper say in this yet. Everybody recommended that I got a bit stiffer springs adjusted for my weight, so I got some advice from professionals, and now I have everything that I need to actually refurbish the front fork, and I'm also quite proud of that process. I also bought the motor, I also bought the inverter, and I also bought a lot of other small parts that in general are progress, but distractions, as I meant. As for the motor and the inverter, those are big things, they are big parts of the progress. Those are actually also big chunks of the budget. I have them right here to my right. I'm gonna talk about them a bit in a second, but this is all part of, okay, I've finished taking my bike apart. What should I do? Let's start buying stuff to put on it before I even have all of the other parts cleaned up and ready to put back together. So now it's a mix of everything. I've started at 0. I went to 1 as the first video, and then back straight to 30, and now back to 2. This has been of a shuffle. I bought the MZizo EM-Drive 500 as the inverter, and I bought an MHAX 208 as the motor. Initially, I wanted the 188, that was the smallest that they have, lowest power, but still more than enough. I didn't want to go for a DC motor with the, let's say, go-kart approach, where you just have DC battery straight to DC motor, or motor with attached inverter or transformer, or however you want to call it. I didn't want to go for this approach because I wanted something with a bit higher power, and with higher power comes higher current for lower voltages, so I bumped the voltage up to a level that I felt was still manageable for me as a first project, so I said 120 volts is the way to go. This comes still with a lot of current problems, in the sense that I will need a lot of current to squeeze some performance out of this motor. I can run it for sure with appropriate performance with low currents, but I wanted also to have the ability to push it a bit further if I'm going already at higher speeds and actually need higher power, not from 0 to 100, but to actually be able to accelerate in highway. And highway times is far in the future, but part of having higher currents due to this 120 volt voltage is actually having some chunky wires like this transferring all the electrons from the battery to the inverter. So I'm actually having trouble holding this up. It's like 5 or 6 kilos worth of copper in my hand, but this is essentially 95 square millimeters of shielded copper wire to take the electrons from battery to inverter, and from inverter to the motor. This is recommended from the MZizo manufacturer, so I'm taking a very careful approach there and trying to adhere to manufacturer specs and not just invent stuff out of the top of my head. And in the same process of going for lower hanging fruits, I decided to attack a higher or a larger project. In this sense, it was the battery. The battery, in my opinion, is at the moment where I still need to dedicate most time and most money, because cells are expensive. But I already dedicated quite a bit of time and money in having some BMS parts produced. And I mean produced because I've taken open source things. This is Fox BMS, or Fox BMS 2 to be more precise. These are designed by Fraunhofer, a German company. They developed an open source concept for a BMS that I'm taking advantage of. Essentially, they have all the design already put together. They have the bombs for the components. I bought the components, I put the design in production, and now I have the PCB here. One of the reasons why I cannot go any further in terms of the story is because once I powered the master board for then trying to flash it, I hoped at the time I had luckily a thermal camera with me. I had some foresight there, and I saw some diodes, 2 diodes in specific, going very hot and then dying, so I already know there's a short circuit somewhere. I hope not on the IC, on the microprocessor, because it's one of the most expensive parts, and it would be the biggest pain to actually take out and replace, since it's a BGA thing. But yeah, that's one of the things that I've hit as an obstacle, and I've shelved the project because I require more complex tools, more time to delve into the schematic. In my optimistic approach, I thought it would be plug and play after my manufacturing process, but I also need to realize that I was the pick and place machine, so I'm also prone to errors, and that's the reality of things. Other sources of distraction were tools. So I got the inverter, I got the motor, I also got a laptop or benchtop power supply to power some things around. I wanted to test the headlight, I wanted to test the charger. I also bought a charger for the motorcycle, an onboard charger, 3.3 kilowatt thing. I'll get to that in a second or later even. But I needed tools to turn them on to power cycle them easily without having to power cycle the whole lab power supply. So this is where stuff like this comes in, which is simple safety or banana jack, PCB, where I can plug things in and then switch them on and off at will, just to check that everything works together nicely. And this is also something that I used for turning on the BMS for the first time. Didn't really help in not burning anything, but at least I had some nice tools. I also have other tools, for instance, for communicating with the charger. I needed a CAN bus or a CAN to USB adapter. This CAN to USB adapter was having trouble communicating with it in the first attempt. After reviewing the wiring and so on, I just went for the basic problem of I haven't had it terminated, and I assumed that wouldn't be a problem because it was such a short wire. But instead of just soldering two resistors there together, I just designed a full PCB that acts as a CAN node and will be useful in the future, but at the same time has the terminator resistors already there. So that actually solved the problem. It was a successful small side project, but also time consuming. And a big thing that actually has been on my plate through 2024 in specific, and part of the reason why 500 days later I'm here giving you an update, is a Formula student. So I haven't really gotten out of that world. There's actually a t-shirt from Formula Student Portugal where I was involved in 2023, end of 2023, in getting the event together as a volunteer, just doing some inspections to the cars. And then I was invited to have a more, let's say, involved role in the competition to bring it to higher level of quality. So in general, that was my biggest project for 2024, and had a lot of success, I would say. If you go on YouTube and watch Formula Student Portugal 2024 video, you're going to see just a summary of what we did last year. So I'm quite proud of that. But in essence, it takes a bit of time away from this. And I don't mean it as an excuse. I just mean that I was a bit too optimistic with how time flows and how work-life balance actually goes around. And I guess some of you understand me. Some of you will say, okay, this guy is full of shit. And this is essentially what has been keeping me busy for the past 500 days. Bike shedding the shit out of this project. I have tried to focus, but more exciting stuff comes in the way. And in general, I think I'm coming to a point where I realize that this is not really the best approach, even though there's progress and I can show things for it. There's no real coherent progress, or there's no real sense of, okay, he's put the mechanical part back together, now let's attack the motor, and now let's attack this and that and so on. So I'm trying to be a bit more organized around this, and hopefully this is something that you can see in the near future. I realized I have mentioned this 500 days ago, but you'll need to take my word for it this time. So I hope that I can build onto this diagnose for the future, and I hope you stick around to actually be a part of it as well. So in that case, see you next time.